Good afternoon. This is Dyke Hendrickson, and we are at the daily podcast, Life Along the Merrimack. It's an exciting day for me. I'm almost finished my book, which is titled Merrimack, the Resilient River. I am a journalist and an author. I've written 5 books. This will be my 6th book. And this is going to be about the Merrimack River and some of its challenges, and also bringing up some of its beauty. So I'm going to move right along. I have many slides. I think we may get about halfway today, and next week I can get back with the second half of them. Here is the Merrimack River in Newburyport. This is a wonderful photo from a drone. And the Merrimack was discovered in about 1605 by Champlain, the Frenchman, but the French didn't stick around. The English took it right over, and Newbury, which later became Newburyport, was not discovered, but was settled in 1635. Newburyport has a big history of fishing, but of course, fishing is not a vibrant undertaking right now. Here's the Newburyport Harbor. Here are some of the fishing boats. There are probably 6 or 8 there this summer. There are many boats in the canal itself, in the harbor itself. Close to 1,500 boats are registered this year with the harbor master in Newburyport. So Newburyport Harbor is a busy spot. When we think about the whole river, the Newburyport section of it ends at the Atlantic, but of course it goes much upriver. And part of its history is the mills and Lowell and Lawrence and Haverhill and Manchester, New Hampshire, and other places. Here's a recent shot in Lawrence, Massachusetts. It has many of the old mills still there, but on the right, you can see it's modernizing somewhat. They're building a garage, a parking garage. And so Lawrence is making a comeback. Lawrence was founded in about 1847, and it filled up immediately. It hired thousands of mill workers, and the North Shore and the area of the Merrimack Valley was a destination for many immigrants, starting from about 1840. Farther upriver, probably the opposite, is this is near Franklin, New Hampshire, and this is Whitewater. The river starts in Franklin, New Hampshire. That's above Concord and Manchester. The river is 117 miles long. As you can see, it's quite varied in its uses. Up here, it's, looks just like it looked 200 years ago, probably. But we have many urban areas and many mills. So as we talk about the Merrimack River, we'll be learning both about its past, and also it has many different aspects to it. Much of it is clean. Much of it's available for boating, for fishing, and parts of it like this, you could go swimming. So we're talking about the Merrimack River, and it has many various aspects to it. Last summer about this time, towards the end of August, a bunch of energetic kayakers decided they wanted to bring more attention to the river. They want people to help make it cleaner. And they were called the Voyagers. There are about a dozen of them here who made it every day. And they went from Franklin, New Hampshire, which we just saw, to Newburyport. And it's 117 miles. They camped every night. Their plans, I've got to say, were really upended, because they were supposed to camp out on the beach or on a campus of a college. And then it rained very hard every night. So here they were, had to find special places to sleep, special places to eat. And this McDonald's sign in the background, an eatery, tells us this is in Haverhill. So they came all the way down, took them 4 days, and it's really remarkable. They got a lot of media coverage. And one thing they wanted to point out is tell people about CSOs. Those are combined sewage overflows. And when it rains very hard, the mills, the sewage treatment plants in Manchester and Lowell and Lawrence and Haverhill they can't get rid of all the stormwater that comes into their sewage treatment plant. So the rainwater mixes with the effluent. They can't handle it all, and they have to have a discharge. And so many thousands of gallons of effluent go into the river. Yes, this is happening as we speak today, but that was one of their points. They're saying, let's figure out a way we can improve the sewage treatment plants. We need less effluent in the river, but they're really energetic and had a great idea. And these are some of the voyagers. Now, it's not just effluent that makes the river dirty. This is a drain in the Methuen area, and you can see it comes from not a sewage treatment plant, but from a street. There's also a lot of refuse, such as shopping carts, as you see there. This adds to the refuse and pollution in the Merrimack River. And so I think the voyagers and others are trying to say, can't we come up with a program that will keep the river cleaner? So we can have people pick debris out of the river so that less rainwater and effluent and pollution gets into the Merrimack. But as you know, the Merrimack is just a wonderful place for naturalism. It still is. Here is the end of the river down near Plum Island. They're fishermen, they're boaters. This is a wonderful shot taken by Brian Eaton, a photographer for the Daily News in Newburyport. And to me, this is, for a lot of people, it's just a good moment. It's warm, it's sunny, people are fishing, people are boating. It's just a good moment. And one of the reasons why the Merrimack is so great. Now, one person who didn't think the Merrimack was so great, and this goes way back, is Henry David Thoreau. He wrote a book in about 1839 called A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. It was published in 49, but he wrote it in 39 on a trip with his brother. And he basically said, as he watched the mills in Lowell go up, he said, this is going to be very bad for the fish, very bad for wildlife. And he was right. And now there are very few fish that can get upriver to spawn without the aid of fish lifts and things like that. So he's very well known for his concern, because Lowell started the mills in about 1823. And by 1839, there are many mills. And in those days, they did put up dams so they could collect the water, which would guarantee them hydropower. They also put a lot of garbage and debris into the river. So Henry David Thoreau turned he spent more time on the Concord River than the Merrimack River, as he wrote his book, A Week on the Concord and Merrimack Rivers. And he was just very discouraged, even at that date, so far back. Now, we are about 2 centuries out from the mills, and that because in 1822 or 23, Lowell had its first mill. So there's this 2 centuries, and the river is getting cleaner, but way back when, Henry David Thoreau said this could be a problem. Now, parts of the river are much cleaner, and as a result, a lot of wildlife is coming back. This is an eagle. Eagles have been returning in recent decades. There's an eagle festival. And here is an eagle with a nice meal and a nice table. It looks like there's social distancing going on, because I don't see another eagle. But the Merrimack is clean enough to have fish, clean enough to have eagles. And this was taken by Brian Eaton, also a really wonderful shot. And here is every community has beautiful spots on its land front. This is in Methuen. This is in a public landing area. We can launch your boats. And here's a sailboat in Methuen on a pretty summer day. And of course, the river goes 117 miles from Newburyport all the way up to New Hampshire. And here's just an example of the beauty of it in early fall. One challenge, and this several years ago, the Merrimack River was named one of the 10 most vulnerable rivers in the country. That appellation was given by American Rivers Society. It's a nonprofit in New York which studies rivers. And it said, in addition to sewage treatment plants, The Merrimack River gets a lot of runoff because there's so much building, macadam, and you can see condos here, you can see houses, you can see roads that could lead to putting runoff into the river. So a concern of the American rivers is that steps be taken so that the runoff from the streets and from the garages and whatever doesn't go right in the river. But I think you can see here that much development is going on along the Merrimack River. Unlike those handsome houses and greenery there, here is what a mill town looked like in late 19th, early 20th century. This is the Spicket River in Lowell. There are many steam stacks there, and thousands of people work there. And maybe it's because it's black and white, but it doesn't look all that clean. A little grungy, one might say. But the railroad had arrived, and so this was what a mill community looked like more than a century ago. One of the this is from Lowell, and this shows how many mills there were in just a small part of the area, and how many bricks had to be made. I kind of laugh at it, but it's true that in addition to the mills making cotton and wool and different kinds of apparel, the area was responsible for making a lot of bricks. And if you've been to Lowell or Lawrence, you'll know that there are many, many buildings, large buildings, and they're being reused. In fact, I think you can see on the left, there's a loft building, and they're trying to get some people in there. And Lowell and Lawrence and Haverhill are trying to modernize, and the river is a centerpiece of those efforts. And here, this city and state and federal authorities are always trying to make things better. There are numerous water utility cleaning areas on the river. And this is one, I think they optimistically to the bottom of the sign there showing these two fellows doing some fishing. But there's a lot of attention given to clean water. Now, I didn't know this before I began my research, but more than 500,000 people in the Merrimack Valley get their drinking water from the Merrimack River. Now, obviously, that is handled and purified, and it goes through numerous scientific tests. But nevertheless, it makes one want to say, we have to keep it as clean as we can. We don't want companies with serious chemicals putting some of their residue in the water. There's an assertion upriver in New Hampshire that one company is letting arsenic off into the river, and that is a hard compound to get rid of. So don't panic, anybody, but it is another reason why we would like a clean river, because so many people get their drinking water. And there are still many areas of the North Shore that are very beautiful. It's a good place to keep a boat. This is taken from Amesbury. Maudsley State Park is across the way, and it just looks like a fine spot for summer. And as you can see, there's still some wonderful virgin forests here along the river. And in many ways, it's a great place for recreation. Of course, so there are boats of all kinds on the river. This is what they call a cigarette boat. They go rather fast. Of course, the rule says that you can't make a wake in the harbor. So if these guys want to, really get speeding along, they have to go outside of the harbor and into the ocean. But that's the Gillis Bridge in the background. It is opening, and I think you can see a sailboat with a mast coming through. And it does hold up traffic, but it gives people in their cars a chance to look around and see how beautiful the river is. Again, here's a wonderful shot of the river. This was taken again by a drone, and it shows us what Newburyport looks like. There's the river, there's the wide harbor and the Joppa Flats area off to the right, and there's the Plum Island to the right, and Salisbury Beach to the left. I think this is a wonderful photo. taken, and you can see how narrow the harbor entrance is. For many years, that made it difficult for ships to get into the harbor. Before there were engines, they'd have to tack in or be pulled in or wait for the tide to be right, and because there's a strong tide going east from the river, there's strong waves coming west from the ocean, and sometimes it can help you get into the harbor, and sometimes it makes it more difficult. There's about a 12-foot draw on the harbor at low tide, which means it's 12 feet deep. And so you've got to make sure that you know what the tides are. And if you have a large craft, you wait for high tide before coming into Newburyport. Here's one of the fellows from the Voyagers, Derek Mitchell, his name is. He's with the Chamber of Commerce over in Haverhill. And he wrote an essay really for the Haverhill paper, which I'm using in my book, about how valuable a trip down the river was with the Voyagers, how much he enjoyed it, and how much these elected officials and community leaders are interested in trying to help keep the river clean. Now, when we talk about Newburyport, which is the first community in, as we think about the Merrimack River, New Hampshire being the last, Newburyport was a very, very large shipbuilder. And you can see from this painting from 1852, that the ships were huge and they went around the world, and Newburyport was as prominent as Salem or Boston or New York in terms of being a national and international trader and building large ships. This painting was done by Richard Burke Jones of Newburyport. It's a wonderful shot. And he's the city clerk of Newburyport also. But this is 1852. And I believe you can see how large the vessels were. Some of them weighed 200,000 and 300,000 tons and were larger than some of the buildings. Here's the launching of one of the last tall ships or large ships from Newburyport. This is the Symington. The year was 1893, and this was actually going to be a four-master. And when a ship was finished, it was time for great rejoicing. It employed so many people to build it. There were people who worked with wood, people who worked with iron, people who worked with rope, who made the sails, who made the food for the workers. You can see women in the foreground got dressed up for the big event. You can see how large it is, probably 300 feet. And it hadn't got its masts up yet. What would happen is the ship would be put into the water, make sure it caulked correctly, and then at a later time, the masts would go up. But this is, again, about 1893. The challenge with a ship like this was it can get out of the Merrimack River, which we said was shallow, very shallow at low tide, say 20 to 25 feet at high tide. But if a big vessel like this went out empty, it could succeed. But if it was filled with cargo and therefore much heavier, it could not get back through the harbor easily, even at high tide. But this is a wonderful photo, I do say. Later on, when mechanized ships and some of these steamships came to Newburyport, hundreds of people were interested in going out on rides, as you can see. Now, this was a time when this is probably 1910 or so, most people did not have cars. Most people did not have boats. So if they can get a ride on a side wheeler like this, it was a big event. They could take a trolley car down to the wharf here in Newburyport and they can get on. It was a big day. Newburyport never got into the building of steamships, partly because there was a shallow harbor and partly because the leading shipbuilders just didn't want to make the move. They were copacetic with what they were doing. They were successful. And only about 2 or 3 steel steamships were built here. And it just didn't take off, again, partly because the river was so shallow. And here's photo from Cashman Park, if you've been there. It's a wonderful place to launch a boat. Now, this is the largest public launching area in the state, and scores of boats are launched every weekend. In fact, I was down there last weekend. I couldn't get a parking spot. That is very unusual. Folks were coming in with their boats, trailering their boats, and many people were going down to walk on the rail trail. It was a beautiful day. And but this is just a shot a little upriver from the downtown Cashman Park and the boats that go there. Another fine park in Newburyport is Joppa Park, which was established in 1871. They've done a wonderful job with the bullards, those vertical stone elements on the left. They've planted flowers. You can walk, you can sit, you can look at the many vessels down the way. This area used to be used for clamming. Now, occasionally, the water's clean enough that clamming can still be done. And I quickly point out, excuse me, that there is a establishment right in Plum Island where clams are taken to be purified. So if you get a clam from the Joppa Flats, A, do not eat it yourself. B, make sure it goes down and gets purified. Because as we said, there is much pollution that's come down, but because of this purification plant, the clams can be purified, and a good fried clam can be eaten from Newburyport. One of the great institutions of the river is the Coast Guard. Newburyport is the birthplace of the Coast Guard. In 1790, Alexander Hamilton and George Washington got together. Hamilton said, "We don't have any money following the Revolutionary War." Washington said, "Well, do you have any ideas?" And Hamilton said, "Yes, I think we should build some revenue cutters, small vessels that can go out and stop the smuggling, and also board ships to make sure they're paying the correct amount of duty." So Washington approved of 10 revenue cutters. The first one was built in Massachusetts. That was the Massachusetts. And it lasted several years, and 9 more were built elsewhere. And the revenue cutter service kept that name for many years. The Coast Guard, that term was not used until 1915, when the revenue cutter service, the life-saving service, and the lighthouse service all eventually came together to make the Coast Guard. But the Coast Guard, the birthplace of the Coast Guard, is in Newburyport. Maybe some of you have seen Ben Butler's Toothpick over in Salisbury. It's a very good aid for navigational aid for people coming in, for boaters coming in. Ben Butler was very prominent in his day. He was a Yankee general in the Civil War. He was later the governor of Massachusetts, and he lived in Newburyport for a while. So here's Butler's Toothpick. Amusement Center in Salisbury has been patronized for many years, and probably some of you have gone over and gotten some fried dough or played skee ball or something. A good part of it's still left, but this is in a postcard from probably the late 30s. And for many, many years, Salisbury has been a favorite. This, of course, is Salisbury Beach, and it's winter now, but one of the great pristine beaches on the North Shore and part, and it is very close to the Merrimack River. And the people in Salisbury want a clean river too, because sometimes refuse comes out from the jetties. And but this is just a beautiful shot of the Salisbury Beach. We also have a shot here. That's the this is the bridge that links Amesbury and Newburyport, the Whittier Bridge. John Leaf Whittier was a nationally prominent poet during the 19th century. In my book, Merrimack, the Resilient River, I have taken a whole poem of his. He wrote a long poem titled The Merrimack, and so that's going to be part of the book. But this is a wonderful shot. This bridge cost $292 million. it links the two. It's a great asset for this area. And it just shows you the width of the river at some places. In some places, it's 200 feet, at others, half of that. And it might be 3 feet in Lawrence, where I was last week, or it might be 20 feet in another spot. So it's a changing river, a changing size, changing width. This is a wonderful shot that reminds us, the Merrimack is not just full of mills and restaurants and boat yards. There are many beautiful areas. Brian Eaton took this photo. And there's another photo. Probably a lot of people have been through Amesbury, and this is probably outside of Lowell's Boatyard. It's showing Amesbury in a wonderful way, just a wonderful photo. And it shows you the many pretty areas that exist on the Merrimack. One of the reasons I'm doing the book is most people have not seen even part of the Merrimack River. So I have photos from Franklin, New Hampshire, where it starts, and all the way down here to Amesbury and Newburyport, where it ends. So I'm hoping that people will be interested in the history of the river, as well as seeing different parts of it. And here's John Greenleaf Whittier right here. He was very prolific, very prominent, lived in Haverhill, Amesbury area, and was one of the most well-known poets of his day. Here's another piece from Amesbury, Lions Park. It indicates that one of the largest vessels for the Continental Congress was built here. And it goes way back to 1777. So this is certainly a historic area. And this whole area that we're in, belonged to the Indians at one point. And this kind of sums it up. This was taken in Concord, New Hampshire, but it does sum up everything, or at least many parts of the history. Until 1600, the Native Americans lived here. After that, the Europeans came here, and unfortunately, there were many, many diseases. And this sign indicates once numbering in the thousands. By the 1700s, only a remnant of the group remained in the area. So this is sad reality, but the Native Americans did live in the area for centuries before Europeans got here. So this is about my last slide today. We're going to pick up next week. I hope you can look in on this. This is just another shot that shows how beautiful the river is. This is the town line of Amesbury and Merrimack. And Merrimack, as a river, had the C in it or the K in it. But in 1914, the state legislature, at the behest of many local politicians, decided that Merrimack, the river, would be spelled with a K. Now, Merrimack, the town, is still spelled with a C. So here are some nuances that are probably not very important, but nevertheless, I give them to you. So that's it for me for the day. I'm Dyke Hendrickson. This is the podcast, Life Along the Merrimack. I enjoy doing it each week. We talk about the health and history of the Merrimack River. I have about 90 slides, which are going into my book, Merrimack, the Resilient River. And I urge you to come back next week. We'll see more slides and hear a little more history. Thank you very much.